back to Tech Tips, Fixes and More. I'm Ron, and today we're going to be looking at a 55-inch TV. It's actually a Samsung UN55NU 6900F. And this is a TV that we have been using down at our church and started to give trouble a while back, where we would try and turn the thing on either with the on-off button on the bottom or with a remote, and it would flash sometimes. Sometimes it would come on right away, sometimes it wouldn't come on right away. If you tried multiple times, eventually you could usually get it turning on, but it was very unreliable. Fortunately, I do have a spare board and a few other accessories for this particular TV because I worked on one before that had a bad screen and I saved some parts of it. Here's the remote that goes with this thing. And basically what happens is when I press the power button on the remote, you might see it flicker here. No flicker? Sometimes it does. There was a flicker there. I'll try it again. And quite often after you try this several times, it will, there we go, then all of a sudden it starts to work. Now it's coming on. There we go. So we don't know what the problem is. I've done some research and I haven't found anything specifically. So I decided to bring it into the shop and take a look. I'm suspecting some sort of a power supply problem, but that's totally just a guess. So I'm going to be getting it up on a table and start the process of opening it up. It always turns off properly, and once it's been on, quite often it'll come back. But it seems to be the first time you turn it on after it's been off for a little while. So I looked online for some information on how to open these. I have opened one of these up before, but of course I sort of forgot how it works. So I took a look online and found a video that kind of shows how to do it. And I'm going to see if I can recreate that without doing any damage. First I'm going to remove the power cable. So there is the main PC board. In fact, in these TVs there is only one PC board that I know of. I've had one of the other ones open and I have a spare one of these boards. These are little speaker units here and here, and I believe this is the infrared detector circuit for the remote, and this is the on-off switch if you want to use a manual on-off switch. The popping noise that you heard was as the connectors, or the little spring clips that connect to these cables, popped off there. This is what those little clips look like. They pop onto those cables. Like any situation with troubleshooting a device that is faulty, but even more so if it's an intermittent kind of a problem, the very first thing you do once you get the thing open, I believe, is do a visual inspection. And there's a few things to look for. Obviously, there's a number of ribbon cables here with connectors. So it's important to check all of these connectors just to see if there's anything visually wrong with them, if anything has come loose. And I don't see anything, but I'm going to look more closely. Another thing that I would do after I've checked for anything like that, I would check the printed circuit board itself and look for anything that's either damaged or loose, or any burnt components or burnt spots on the board. And also look for capacitors that are bulged or in any way look like they're different. These electrolytic caps would be important to look at, and I don't see anything obviously wrong with any of those. There's some more here. They're not bulged. I don't see any burnt spots, and I wouldn't expect that with a kind of an intermittent problem where it works some of the time. There's another big cap here. This is a high voltage cap. And caps can get leaky, of course, and you can't see anything visually on them. So any of these caps could be faulty. We've got rectifiers here. I don't see anything wrong with them. I could do a diode check on them, but again, it does work once it gets started. So it seems to me that maybe there's a voltage that is just borderline, and that's going to be challenging to find out what that might be. Although in some of these boards, they're pretty good about showing the actual voltages that should be on some of these pins. So I'll have to take a closer look at that. Anyways, an initial examination of this is not showing up anything obvious. All these connectors seem to be seated properly. With these kind of connectors here, it is possible that they could be partially pulled out or something. And typically, if you did see that, they might be misaligned a little bit. So these all look very straight. So I don't see anything there. So I've learned by hard experience that when you're working on one of these TVs, the LCD panel is pretty fragile. It doesn't take much to break them, either by dropping, by twisting, or by setting them down on something hard that will distort them and they just crack. So what I need to do here as I do some testing is I want to be able to see whether or not the screen comes on. So what I've done is I have an old blanket on this table. I've got some foam, and I've got a board that stretches all the way across with a bit of foam on it, so that the weight of the screen sits on the outer edges of it. And then I've added this mirror so that I can just see if the screen lights up when I power it up. And hopefully, in all the process of getting that set up and getting the back off, that I haven't already done any damage to the screen. Now this is somewhat interesting here, because in the information I looked at before, it talked about the LED that shows that there's power on to this TV, but it's really difficult to see that LED because it's on the very bottom edge, and unless you get right down under it like we are right now, you can't see it. So I've plugged in the AC power. That's the power switch right there. So I'm gonna push that button in, and we'll go and look, see if we get anything on the screen. Nothing so far. I'm going to try again to see if I can get this working by pushing the power switch. Oh, there we go, and it kicked in. The screen is on now. Okay, so I was wrong. This little unit down here is not the infrared sensor. When I look more closely, that's the Wi-Fi module, which allows it to connect to your Wi-Fi. The actual infrared is down in with the power switch module here. The light is on down in there. There. When I hit the remote button, it came on all of a sudden. So based on this and some further testing, what became clear was that when you first turn the TV on using either the switch or the remote control, when you first push the on button, the light on the bottom would turn out briefly and then it would turn back on, and the backlight would not turn on. If you tried it again, it would usually turn on, but not always. Every once in a while, it would take 2 or 3 tries. But eventually it would start working. So we had a problem, and we needed to find, so we had a problem and we needed to narrow that down somehow. So I decided to take a look at my spare board and see what I could do with it to further the testing procedure. So I had a problem with one of these TVs once before. Someone had hit the screen and damaged it, and it was necessary to take it apart, and I basically took the electronics board and cables and some of the accessories out of that unit and have kept them for a while, because we have several of these TVs, and I figured eventually we would run into the problem where we needed a spare part, if only for even troubleshooting processes. So this is the unit that I took out of this other TV. As far as I know at the time, it was working fine. And this is the actual on-off switch and infrared sensor. When the AC power is turned on to the TV, there's an LED on here that is on while AC power is on, and it goes out when you turn on the TV. And so I'm going to take this unit and I'm going to connect it up to the TV that has the fault that I'm troubleshooting right now. So here's the actual switch and infrared detector here, and I'm going to disconnect it. I've got the power disconnected, unplugged from the TV, so that came out easily. Here's the one from the spare unit. Just pop that in. And I'll just set this unit down here. It will pick up the infrared signal from both sides of that board. So first I'll power the thing up, or plug in the AC power again. And you'll notice that the board there has the little red light on. Okay, when I press the power button, notice that the red light went off and on and back off. And you can see through the holes in the back of the chassis that the backlight came on. And you can probably hear it in the background. So if I hit this again, there, the light came on, and the lights and the backlight went off, the TV went off. So at that point, although I didn't get it on video, I did some additional testing, turning on the TV, off the TV, watching the LEDs, and watching the backlighting. And what I found was sometimes it would turn on, sometimes it wouldn't turn on. And repeating this over and over again, eventually I kind of came to the conclusion that what was happening was when the power had been off the TV for a while and you hit the remote or the on-off button, the first time you did it, the little red light on the bottom would go out temporarily, indicating that the TV was trying to turn on, and then the light would come back on, indicating that it had shut itself off. And that was quite disconcerting because it shouldn't do that, obviously. And then often on the second time that you tried it, the TV would come on. There was the odd time it would take 2 or 3 tries. But one of the things I noticed was that if you weren't watching the little red LED on the bottom, you sometimes really didn't know whether the thing had turned on and turned itself off, or if it had stayed on, unless you looked at the screen, which I think was part of the problem that we were having. People would try to turn on the TV, it wouldn't turn on immediately, they'd hit it again, and then they'd get into the sequence where they weren't sure what was happening with it. But definitely there is a problem, or was a problem, so I had to pursue this further. So I removed the main board, and I replaced that board, including the Wi-Fi module that was with it, and I put in the on-off infrared module that I had been using before as well. Connected up the connectors in here, and I'm going to power it up and just see what happens and see if anything different occurs than what was happening before. So here we go, I'll plug this in and we'll try the remote, see if we can turn this thing on. And then the backlight came on. So that works correctly. And then if I hit the on or the off button, it turns off the backlight again. You can see the backlight through the holes here. Okay, so it seems to be working right with the replacement board. So the question is, can I track down what is wrong with the board and fix it? One part of that question is whether or not I should do it, because sometimes replacing components in a board like this is not recommended. There can even be legalities or liabilities involved in replacing components on a board like this, as I mentioned before. So I'm going to spend some time looking at the old board and see if I can see anything or if I can measure anything. So I spent some time doing some testing on the old board and comparing that to some of the tests on the new board. And I could show you all that, but it took me quite a long time and it didn't actually yield much in the way of results. I checked the power supply voltages that I could find. There were a few silk-screened pieces of information on the board to show what voltages should be at what point. And I checked those. They all seemed to be within range. And being that I didn't have a schematic, I really wasn't able to do a very methodical troubleshooting procedure on it. All I was able to do is do some tests. So in the end, I couldn't find anything wrong doing any of the voltage measurements, and coupling that with the fact that I wasn't sure a person should really do a lot of changes on these boards. They include switching power supplies with fairly high voltages, and I just wasn't sure that was a good idea to even replace parts on a board like this. It probably should have the whole board replaced. So I just ended up leaving the board that I had salvaged out of another TV in there and buttoned the thing up and gave it back, or brought it back to where we use it at the church. So I think that's where we have to leave you on this. I would have liked to have been able to narrow this thing down to a particular component, but it just didn't seem like the feasible way to solve the problem, and I did have a spare board that I could use for that. So that's what I did. So I think that wraps this one up. So I do thank you for tuning in and sticking with me for this. Hopefully there's something useful in there for you if you actually play around with TV repairs. And I should say that we have another video coming out that's the second part of my thermostat project, and that's not quite finished yet, so I decided to insert this video in before that. But that video should be out within a reasonable length of time, and I think you'll find that interesting. I would appreciate it if you would like the video, if you found something useful here, and if you would subscribe, that would be great. And comments are always welcome, especially if they are something constructive. And we'll keep on working on projects as we move further into 2025. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you on the next one.